Alright, so previously we saw how to activate the caustics and the setup that you need to go ahead and put in place for caustics to even work in the first place, which wasn't that big of a deal. We just had to set up a few things. Now in this video, what we need to do is talk about how to control the look of the caustic effect. Now caustic effects are very versatile in the sense that there's so many ways we can change the look of the effect in terms of the shape, the actual silhouette here of the caustics that we get, the size of the caustics. We can change the color of the caustics. There's a lot of stuff we can change, and we're going to go over all that stuff now in this video. Okay, so there's three different ways we could change the caustic effects. We could change the caustic effects using the actual spotlight that's casting the caustic photons, and we can also control the caustic effect through this glass material, believe it or not, and we can also control the caustic effect the third way using the actual mental ray renderer options. So let's start off with the light first, and we'll see how that can affect the scene. Let's go to Explore, let's go to Lights, let's pick the spotlight, and let's go ahead and open up its shader PPG. Okay, so let's see how we can control this. We can control this just like we were controlling global illumination in the other videos by controlling, say, this color of the actual photons here. So let's change the color to, say, a green. And now I'll go ahead and update, and our caustic photons are now going to be green. That's a very simple way of controlling the caustic effect here. So let me turn that back to white. And intensity, of course, is going to control the intensity of the caustic effect. So if we knock that up into the 50,000 range, we're going to get a pretty bright caustic effect. As you can see, that's pretty blown out. That's very, very bright. And alternatively, of course, we can drop down the intensity of the caustic effect to make it extremely subtle, a very subtle, soft caustic effect. Let me go ahead and knock that back up to 10,000, the default. Now, the number of emitted photons are going to go ahead and control the number of photons, which controls the quality, and we'll get into that in the next video once we start talking about and going over how to control the quality of the caustic effect. So we're not going to worry about the number of photons now, and 10,000 is good because it's going to give us fast updated renders. So let's close this PPG. That's one way how to control the caustic effect. Another way to control the caustic effect, which is pretty interesting, is let's go ahead and select the vase, and then let's go up here to shader, and we'll open up the PPG for the Fong shader, the glass shader that we put on that vase, and we can actually use this shader, let's pin it down real quick, to control the caustic effect itself. So let's see how we can do that. Well, the way the caustics works is it works with the specular attribute of whatever shader you're using. So in this case, our Fong shader does have a specular attribute, and it's right here in this area, and we can control the caustic effect using the specular controls of our shader. So if we go over here to color, for example, and we change the color to, say, a red, the caustic effect is going to appear red because we changed our specular color on the vase itself to reddish color. Remember that caustics works with the specular attribute of a material. So making changes to the specular attributes on the material is going to dramatically make changes and directly affect the caustic effect. So let me go ahead and turn that back to white. Let's go over here to transparency and reflection, where we can have even more control over the caustic effect itself. Now you can see that the caustic effect is displaying this sort of shape here, this caustic shape, and there's actually, that's not a random thing. Mental Ray isn't just randomly throwing out this shape. It's actually calculating it based on what you told it. So you're probably wondering, well, I never told it what shape to choose. Well, the shape can actually be controlled by the index of refraction here. Now, if you use a boring number, like 1 for example, which basically means that there's no refraction of the light, what we're going to end up with is very boring and very bland. The caustic rays just go through and the photons are displayed in a very straight silhouette way, and that looks boring and very uninteresting. So let's go ahead and change that. If we change that to, say, 1.4, caustic effect will update and we'll get this shape here, which looks much more interesting. Let's go ahead and save that one, and let's change the caustic effect again. This time let's try a refraction index of 1.7. And that will actually change the shape as well. So let's compare. Here's the before and here's the after. You can clearly see that by changing the index of refraction, we actually change the way that the caustic photon rays are going right through this glass. So refraction basically means that you're bending light rays with an object. Like when you look at a pool and you see that caustic effect at the bottom of the pool, that's being caused because the light's concentrated through the water and the rays are being concentrated and refracted on their way down to the bottom of the pool. So that's essentially the same way that mental ray mimics this effect within XSI. So if we change the index of refraction again, this time let's change it to something drastic, like say 3.3. Now we're going to get a completely different shape, or a different caustic silhouette. So here's the before, and here's the after. Two very completely different caustic effects. And it's all controlled by the index of refraction. So let me close out that comparison image. And next, actually let me go over here and let me put this back to 1.4. Just because that's what we were working with before. Okay. So let me go ahead and close that PPG. And the third way we can control the caustic effect is through the actual mental ray render options itself. So let's go over here to render. Let's go to renderer options. Let's pin this down. And in the GI and Caustics tab is where you want to be. Now we have some options here. I'm not going to go over every single option right now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up into halves. In this video we're just going to talk about the options here that control the look and style of the caustic effect, so to speak. And in the next video we'll talk about the parameters that control the quality and the rendering speed of the caustic effect. So all these accuracy settings here work similar to how the photon and global illumination settings work that we were working on earlier. We have a caustic accuracy, photon search radius, a merge factor, and so on and so forth. We also have filters that we can put this through to change the quality of it. And of course we have a caustic photon color. Again, this works just like with the light, and just like with the specular parameter of the material, we can change the color of the photons here. So you can change it to say like a light blue, for example. And the photon effect, let's go ahead and update that, is going to come out to this light blue color, or whatever color you chose over here in the options. So you have a lot of control. You have maximum control over this caustic effect and the way that it looks. Down here you have trace depth settings. They work similar to how the trace depth settings worked with global illumination and how they work with final gathering. You can control here the amount of times that reflections and refractions are allowed with caustics. So these are the default numbers. You can change them if you want. Again, as usual, the rule of thumb is do not set your combined value to anything that's lower than the sum of these two values. I don't think I need to explain that anymore. We've already touched upon that several times during this tutorial. Down here we have photon volume accuracy. So if you're using these caustic photons inside of a volume, say an area with fog or smoke or anything like that, or volumetric lights, you can control the quality and such of the caustic photons using these parameters here. And you would use them the same way that you would use these up here. So they're no different. And down here we have the same parameter that we have with global illumination, where we can tell it to freeze that caustic map, or we can tell it to rebuild the caustic map all over again. And over here in the photon map file, we could go ahead and type in a name for this photon map. So it's pretty simple on how to use this to control the look of the caustic photons over here. So I'm going to end this here, and in the next video we're going to look at how to increase the quality of the photons, get rid of this speckling over here that you can kind of see here, this blotching effect of the photons, and use filters and things to smooth out this photon effect and make it look nice and crisp for a final production render. So I'll see you in the next video.